Planning. Actions to address risks and opportunities. Clause 6.1 of ISO 27001:2013. Hi friends, I welcome you all in this exciting training session being conducted by TNV Academy. Today, in this session, we will discuss about Clause 6 and its first subclause, that is, Clause 6.1 of ISO 27001:2013, which talks about the planning for addressing risks and opportunities. Let me explain you that what we will be covering in this chapter. Coverage in the standard. In this session, we will talk about Clause 6 and its subclauses, that is, Clause 6.1 of ISO 27001:2013. Both of them talks about planning done by the organization to address risks and opportunities. We will take subclause 6.1.1 in this session, which talks about the actions that an organization needs to perform to address the identified risks and opportunities. The remaining subclauses of Clause 6 will be discussed in subsequent chapters. Reference clause within standards or the other standards which can be useful for this chapter. Friends, when we talk about Clause 6 and 6.1.1 of ISO 27001:2013, then it is very important to understand that it takes reference of Clause 4.1 and Clause 4.2 of ISO 27001:2013 to state its requirement. So we advise you that you must have a thorough understanding of Clause 4.1 and 4.2 of ISO 27001:2013 in order to understand the requirements of this clause. External reference for the chapter. If we talk about the external references that you need to know for understanding the Clause 6 of ISO 27001:2013, then you should have an updated version standard copy of ISO 22300:2018 with you. ISO 22300:2018 has definitions for several technical terminologies that are used under different clauses of ISO 27001:2018. So we suggest you that you should keep a copy of the standard with you for your ready reference. Outcome of the chapter. At the end of this chapter, you will understand the basic concepts of planning. Planning in terms of ISO 27001:2013. How an organization can identify risks and opportunities. What actions an organization are supposed to take in order to cater these identified risks. How the organization can plan to work on the opportunities identified. So, let's start our discussion with a brief introduction of the Clause 6 and the basic concepts of planning. Brief introduction of Clause 6. Clause 6 of ISO 27001:2013 typically talks about planning done by an organization to address the risks involved in information security. It also states the fact that during the process of identifying risks and dealing with them, the organization can identify certain opportunities which will help them to eradicate and nullify this risk in future and to make their overall process better and efficient. But before we move forward and discuss the concepts of Clause 6 of ISO 27001:2013, let us first understand what planning is. In simple words, planning can be defined as the process of deciding in advance that what is to be done in future. Planning involves the determination of goals as well as activities and resources that are required to achieve these established goals. Now, if we talk about planning in reference to ISO 27001:2013 and Clause 6, then it says that an organization, point 1, should identify the areas which can be the main contributors of risk for information security management system. Point 2, should plan the activities that will be required to curb these identified risks. Point 3, should plan for resources that will be required and who has the expertise of dealing with these identified risks. Point 4, should identify the opportunities out of these risks to enhance the capability of information security management system. If an organization has planned for all these factors and has the process of implementing these planning, then surely its information security management system will achieve its intended outcomes, which is another requirement of clause 6.1 of ISO 27001:2013. As we said earlier, risk identification is not a simple task, and an organization can get huge help from the implementation of requirements of clause 4.1 and clause 4.2 of ISO 27001:2013. Most of the risks are covered under the requirements of these two clauses, and if the organization has satisfied their requirements respectively, then it will already have the list of risks ready with them and can plan accordingly to eradicate them. Now, let's move forward and look into clause 6.1 and 6.1.1 in detail. Requirement of the clause of the standard. The clause 6.1 of ISO 27001:2013 states that the organization should decide actions to address the risks and opportunities. Then it has another subclause 6.1.1 which says when planning for the information security management system, the organization shall consider the issues referred to in 4.1 and the requirements referred to in 4.2 and determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed to. Point 1. Ensure the information security management system can achieve its intended outcomes. Point 2. Prevent or reduce undesired effects. And point 3. Achieve continual improvement. The organization shall plan. Point 1. Actions to address these risks and opportunities. Point 2. How to integrate and implement the actions into its information security management system processes. And point 2. Evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. Let's understand these requirements one by one. The first statement says that the organization should address the issues identified in clause 4.1 and clause 4.2 of ISO 27001:2013 while planning for the information security management system implementation. In clause 4.1, organization has to determine external and internal issues that can affect its information security management system. While in clause 4.2, organization has to understand the needs and expectation of the interested parties so that information security management system remains flawless. While satisfying the requirements of clause 6.1.1, the organization will take both of these requirements in mind so that it can identify the probable risk to its information security management system. Once the risks are identified, the organization can plan for their remedial activities and resources which will help in remedial process. So why an organization has to identify risk? Well, the answer is quite simple. Merely setting up an information security management system does not mean that everything will be fine and work properly for the information security. There can be elements that can affect the working and smooth going of the ISMS, which are known as risk. Risks can be several and can occur from several sources. Therefore, it is important for the organization to identify these sources and plan how this risk can be nullified so that information security management system can achieve its desired objective. Also, identification of risk is necessary for continual improvement of ISMS. If the risks are not identified properly and not dealt with, the whole ISMS will remain constant forever. If the risks are not identified properly and not dealt with, the whole ISMS will remain constant forever and will not improve from its flaws. The next requirement says that the organization should plan for the actions which it needs to take for the eradication of these identified risks. Actions will be the steps that an organization will take that can be either of the following. Point 1. Change in the operational processes of a certain activity that can bring risk. Point 2. Change in the roles and responsibilities of individuals. Point 3. Bringing in new technologies for better results. The kind of actions can vary and can be many depending upon the type of risks an organization is facing or has identified. Once the organization has identified what actions it has to take to deal with the risk, it has to implement and induce these actions into its information security management system. And the final step would be evaluation of the results, which comes after these actions that has been taken by the organization. Based on the results, the organization will decide that whether the actions taken to eradicate the identified risks were sufficient or they have to implement certain other actions. This does mean that risk identification and risk assessment is an ongoing activity. Friends, we have now come to the conclusion of this segment. Hope you all are clear about the requirements of Clause 6 and its subclause 6.1 and 6.1.1. Practice writing non-conformity under this clause 6.1.1. Now, let's understand how to write non-conformity for clause 6.1.1. It can be understood through an example of sample NC given in AFAR, Audit Findings Action Report 13. Last but not least, let us understand the common mistakes which auditors do while performing audit under the clause 6.1.1 of ISO 27001:2013. Point 1. Auditors ask irrelevant questions for the organization which does not relate with the organization to be audited. Point 2. Sometimes auditors start thinking for the option while auditor need to understand the client process and to decide if the client can achieve the result of the MSS through their own process. Point 3. Auditors start consulting activities. Point 4. Auditors start expecting document and records in clause where this may not be mandatory requirement. Point 5. Auditors asking for FSSAI license and registration, asking for the GST registration, asking for the ROC registration, asking for the commencement of business certificate, asking of PF, ESI registration certificate, which may not be relevant considering the nature of business organization is performing. Dear friends, we have now come to the conclusion of this training session. See you soon with an exciting new topic. Till then, goodbye.